Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Kristine and I make videos about bag reviews, my medical school application, and my weightlifting training as well, and my competitions. So today it's kind of about the medical school application, but kind of like a bit different as well because I want to talk to you about value-based interviews. So if you've seen my previous video about my experience working as a healthcare assistant, I mentioned that I had to go through this thing called a value-based interview. So it's mainly used in the NHS if you are applying as a nurse or say healthcare assistant. Even I think as a medic, I'm not quite sure, but they mainly use this to assess applicants, just to see if their values are aligned with the trust's values. So today I want to discuss how you could ace this interview and what to expect if you are about to have a value-based interview. So what's a value-based interview? I put it VBI for short. So as I mentioned, it is used by the NHS, but it's also used by other organizations, not just the NHS. It is designed to kind of explore how and why people do things in any given situation. And the questions in this type of interview are designed to identify if the interviewee's values are matched or aligned to that of the NHS organizational values. So the main purpose of this is obviously to assess if like the interviewee has those kind of attitudes, the attitudes that are like put highly in the trust, that they expect everyone, all of their workers to have, from porters to the top earning surgeons and medics. So on this slide and the next one, I'm going to show you exactly what the core values of the NHS are and what the NHS expects you as a worker, as a staff member to do under given situations, what they love to see from their staff members, what they expect to see from their staff members, and what they don't want to see from their staff members. So this leaflet gives you a good overview of the values that they put highly, that they rank highly, and that they want to see amongst all of the member staff in the hospitals. Before we discuss the core values of the NHS, I just want to quickly mention, because I've forgotten to mention this in the previous slide, that I found this leaflet from the Oxford University Hospital's NHS website. I'm not sure if this is the same in all of the NHS hospitals in the UK, but I am guessing that it is, because the NHS should be the same, right, in the UK, because it's this governing healthcare system across the whole of the country. But if you are trying to look for this leaflet, just in case you can't see because the writing is too small, I have weird formatting issues, so sorry about that. But if you do want to check it out yourself, I will link it down in the description below. And just in case you're trying to find it yourself, it's from the Oxford University Hospital's NHS website. So, okay, let's discuss the main values of the NHS. So what they want to see from their staff members, the values that they want to see are compassion. I can't write today because I'm using my mouse. Respect, so sorry if I mess this up. Excellence, learning, basically the headings here, delivery, and improvement. So these are the 6 values that they put highly and that they kind of expect every staff member that they have to demonstrate, to display. So let's take respect as an example of a core value. So what they love to see from a staff member who is respectful is that staff member recognizes everyone as an individual and tailors their approach to meet that person's specific needs. So that's what they want to see. It's here. And what they expect to see from a respectful member of staff is that person listens to the people and treat them with dignity and respect. okay? And what they don't want to see is that person treating everyone the same, so not taking into account individuality and maybe like preferences of the patients and things, and don't recognize people as individuals. Okay, so in this big umbrella of the respect value that they want to see from a staff member, these are what they love to see, expect to see, and they don't want to see. So have a read. It doesn't take long, but just to give you an idea of the kind of things they are expecting from someone who works for the trust or someone who will work for the trust. Let's look at an example question now that they might ask you in the actual interview. So the question is, tell me a time when you made a significant mistake at work. They would ask probing questions after this just to kind of like know more about the situation or your response to the situation, and just to like kind of check if you're making things up. So don't ever make things up. Don't lie to them about situations, because they would know. They would ask a ton of other questions, not a ton, but other probing questions just to, get more detail out of you, and if those seem a bit odd, then they probably won't believe you. Yeah, so just be honest all the time. So tell me a time when you made a significant mistake at work, and some of the probing questions could be, what were the consequences for you personally of this mistake, probably, and how you approached this conversation with your supervisor. On this slide, we're going to talk about how you could approach value-based interview questions. So this is just how I would personally approach such questions. It does work really well. I've actually been into 3 value-based interviews now. I already got my job after the first interview, but I decided to go for an extra 2 interviews just to see how value-based interviews work, and just so I could make this educational video for you guys as to how you could ace value-based interviews. So this is the system that worked really well for me, which I think would work so well for you too. So the first step number 1, is to identify the values being tested. So if you remember the question from the previous slide, it was tell me a time when you made a significant mistake at work. So in that specific question, the values being tested are integrity and honesty, learning, improvement, respect. Respect to your manager and your colleagues. So as you might notice, some of these values are on the leaflet that I showed you a few slides earlier. So this is what I'm saying. Identify the values being tested. Remember the core values of the NHS, the 6 main ones. Some of those some of those will be tested in the interview. This is the purpose of this interview, to test if you have these values and to get some examples out of you, like as an evidence to show that you actually have these values. Okay, so after identifying the values being tested, you have to, number 2, prepare. Well, if you're in the actual interview, you can't really prepare a really good example, so you do this beforehand. Okay, I'm gonna show you a table later where you could prepare really good examples for the values being tested, for the specific values that they are testing in the interview. So step number 2 is come up with a good example that you could talk about in detail. Okay, so there's 2 parts to this. A really good example and that you could talk about in detail. So there's no point coming up with a really good example and then not give enough detail. Or there isn't any good giving lots of detail onto something that's completely irrelevant. So make sure it's a good example, relevant to the question and the values being tested. So if it's asking like about the significant mistake at work, don't talk about compassion, don't talk about time management, don't talk about those things. Talk about the question, talk about the values being tested. And make sure that your examples contain lots and lots of detail, because they would ask probing questions to get more out of you. So number 3 is to answer the question using the STAR framework. So the STAR framework, I also kind of use this from medical school interview preparation, the STAR framework. I'll talk about this in the next slide, but just keep that in mind. And number 4 is to demonstrate and highlight positive indicators. So in your answer, you have to demonstrate and kind of like emphasize the positive indicators. I will talk about this again in the next slide. Sorry about my rubbish annotations. I'm using a mouse and it's really hard to control, but I hope that kind of made sense. So number 1, identify the values being tested, come up with a really good example that you could talk about in detail, answer them using the STAR framework, and make sure that in your answer you demonstrate positive indicators. Okay, so let's talk about the STAR framework. So STAR stands for S stands for situation, T for task, A for action, R for results, and reflection. So situation or task, it's actually grouped into one, a situation or task. So you have to describe the situation that you were confronted with or the task that needed to be accomplished. And it's kind of like setting the context. You have to make it really concise and informative. You have to kind of like concentrate it solely on what's useful and relevant to your example or your story that you're trying to tell them. So for example, if they are asking you to describe a situation where you had to deal with a difficult patient or colleague, then you have to explain how you have to explain like the context, the situation, why they were being difficult. So that's S and T. And action, A, it's an important section. All of them are important, but this is important because this is where you need to demonstrate and highlight those key skills and personal attributes that you have. So you have to talk about what you did and how you did it. So now that you've set the context, you need to explain what you did, and in doing so, you need to be aware of, you need to just remember these few things I'm going to tell you now. So you have to be personal. You have to talk about you. If it's about teamwork, talk about how you contributed towards the goal or the goal that the team was trying to accomplish. Be personal, use I. You have to sell yourself in this sort of interviews, and it's no good saying we did this, we did that. You have to say I, and I, and I. I know it sounds really arrogant, feel like you're boasting too much, but trust me, this is the way forwards. This is the way that you're gonna get that job. And you have to get into some detail. Do not and never assume that they can guess what you're trying to say. So you have to really elaborate. This is why don't make things up, because it's really hard to elaborate on a lie, and they'll pick up on that. And try stay clear of any technical information. So if your previous job wasn't in the healthcare system, if you're like a technician or I don't know, computer sciences graduate or something like that, I mean, stay away from really difficult words for nurses or the ward sisters to understand, unless it's really crucial for your story or your example. By the way, in the examples that you're giving them, it doesn't have to be about the healthcare system, because a lot of you guys I know are applying to this sort of jobs as a healthcare assistant, as a porter, or as a nurse. Well, not a nurse, but care support worker. Something, if you're trying to apply for those jobs, sometimes you've not come from a healthcare background. I know a friend, and she's trying to get into medical school as well, and she had to apply as a nursing assistant, and her previous job was solely office based, and no, she hasn't had any experience working directly with patients. And so in her interview, I told her, just use what you've learned from your job right now in the office and just try make it relevant to what they're asking you. So you could give examples that are not entirely set in the hospital or in the healthcare system, but make sure to stay away from too much technical information unless it's completely necessary. And you have to explain what you did, how you did, and why you did it. the why you did it part kind of comes in the reflection bit. So R is results in reflection. So you have to explain what happened eventually and how it all ended, those kind of things. And you have to use this opportunity to describe what you've accomplished and what you've learned. This would kind of make your answer more personal, and it will enable you to further highlight key skills and values that they are looking from you. The why you did it bit, so the reflection bit, is probably the most crucial part of your answer, because the interviewers would want to know that you are like using a variety of skills and that you are showing these values that they want to see from you to achieve certain objectives. And therefore you must demonstrate in your answer that you are, taking specific actions because you're trying to achieve a specific objective and not simply by chance. So what I mean by that is that you have to, if the question, for example, is about discussing a situation where you had to deal with conflict. So a lot of candidates would simply say that I told my colleague to calm down and explain to him what the problem was. But the thing with this, it would not provide a good idea of what drove you to act in this manner, and how you ask him to calm down, how you explain the nature of the problem. You didn't highlight the reasons behind that action. So a better answer would be, I could sense that my colleague was irritated, and so I asked him gently to tell me what he felt the problem was. By allowing him to vent his feelings and his anger, I gave him the opportunity to calm down. I then explained to him my own point of view on the matter, and I emphasized how important it was that we found a solution that suited us both. So that kind of answer is so much better than just saying, yeah, I told my colleague to calm down and explain to him what the problem was. So the second answer is so much better because it helps the interviewers understand what drove your actions, and reinforces the feeling that you were calculating and the consequences of your actions. It provides so much more information about you as an individual. So that's kind of how you should approach these questions. I hope that made sense. If it didn't, just play this video back, please. Now I'm gonna give you an example of how I've answered this question. So I filmed myself and I kind of transcribe what I was saying when I answered this question. Okay, so tell me a time when you made a significant mistake at work. What are the consequences, and how did you approach the conversation with your supervisor? So situation/task. There was a time when I failed to charge my phone the night before my editing job. See, it doesn't have to be about the healthcare industry, because my first job was an editing job. Okay, so I was meant to start at 4 a.m. but since I was extremely exhausted from a competition the night before work, I have forgotten to put my phone on charge, oopsies, which meant that my alarm did not go off the next morning. This actually happened. This is a real story. Also, because I was physically exhausted, I went in a very deep sleep and I just naturally woke up when I felt like I've had enough sleep. I did not wake up until 6 in the morning, which was already 2 hours later than the time I was supposed to start. I still decided, however, to get up and log into my computer and do what needs to be done at work. So that's the context. Action. After my shift, I called my manager to apologize about what has happened today and the reason as to why I was late for work. I also said that I will take full responsibility for what happened and mentioned that I will never let this happen again. I proposed solutions to address this issue, such as buying a separate alarm clock that doesn't need charging and using the alarm function on my smartwatch, so I have more tools to ensure that I wake up on time for work. That's really what I did. And reflection. So this is the important part. I learned that if you take responsibility for your mistakes at work and apologize to your manager and colleagues if appropriate, then they will treat you as an adult. And most of the time they would not mind, especially if this was the very first time it happened, and if you address the issue and attempt to find solutions to fix the problem or prevent it from happening again. So this is the transcription of the recorded answer that I did like a day ago. So this is my completed answer for this question. As you can see, I followed the STAR framework and I have highlighted the skills and the attributes that I have. So I've highlighted respect because I spoke to my manager and I apologized to him and my colleagues for being late at work. I also explained myself thoroughly to them, which means that I'm respecting them as the people in my team. I've also highlighted the fact that I am a very responsible person because although I was late, I still decided to get up and log into my computer and do what needs to be done. It also highlights that I'm an adult, you know, I think like an adult because right after my shift, I called my manager. I didn't prolong it, I didn't pretend like I wasn't late at work. I took full responsibility and I actually proposed things that I could do to prevent it from happening again. So this is kind of like how you should ideally answer this sort of questions. Interviewers evaluate VBI responses actually after the interview. So during the interview, when they're asking you for examples of where you've demonstrated certain values, they would be taking notes. So don't be put off if they start like writing loads and loads of things when you are trying to answer a question. It's probably good because at least they're not making like direct eye contact to you, so you're not gonna feel like uncomfortable or something. But bear in mind that they would take notes during the interview. And then they would review these notes and compare your responses to the positive and negative indicators that they have for each value. And they would look for evidence of positive indicators, and the more the better. So in our example question, one of the values that they were trying to look for is integrity or honesty, right? Because you're admitting that you've made a mistake. So the positive indicators include recognizes learning from decisions, mistakes made, and accepts responsibility. Was forthcoming in explaining decisions or actions, willing to share experience and learning, demonstrates positivity in dealing with problems, takes a proactive approach, and demonstrates respect for others. So in my response, I believe that I covered all of these 4. So they would just like kind of, if they've written it down in their notes and then it matches with a positive indicator, they'll literally just take it off like that. So make sure that you demonstrate positive indicators in your answer. Make sure you really highlight these indicators. And then they would also look at the negative indicators. So he avoids taking responsibility for decisions and mistakes, which I didn't have. Was hesitant in explaining decisions or actions. I wasn't hesitant. I explained thoroughly. Discuss issues in a negative manner. I was actually positive because I actually identified solutions for the problems and suggested ways that could be prevented again. I was proactive. So I basically demonstrated more positive indicators in none of these. And that's what you should aim for. The more the better. Remember, the more positive indicators, the better. And try steer clear from showing any signs of these negative indicators. These indicators, positive and negative, would obviously vary depending on the value that they are testing you. But this is just example. So the scoring framework that they use is very simple. They give a score for each question and they give you an overall score for the interview. So they use a 4-point rating scale. 1 is poor, so you've demonstrated literally 0 or very little evidence of positive indicators, and you've displayed mostly the negative ones. 2 is satisfactory. There's some evidence of positive indicators in your response, but very, very limited, and there are areas for development. And you have displayed some of the negative indicators, which causes 1 or more concerns for them. 3 is good. You have demonstrated a lot of positive indicators, minimal areas of development. You have said few or close to none. Negative indicators, and the top band or the top rate is number 4, which is excellent. You have shown strong evidence of positive indicators and very few or no negative indicators. And basically you've answered it thoroughly, and you've covered most, or if not all, of the positive indicators that they're looking for that specific value. Here are my top tips that I will share with you guys on how you can ace a value-based interview. So number 1, you have to familiarize yourself with the personal guides to values and behaviors provided by the NHS. So this is the leaflet that I showed you earlier on. I hope you still remember that, but if not, check the description down below. And read my ebook. So that's number 2. I actually have created an ebook that contains a question bank of the potential questions they could ask you during a value-based interview, but are not limited to. Obviously, I can't cover every single possible question that they could ask, but I have developed a question bank and some probing questions. Plus, this is a good thing, guys, I gave detailed answers. I gave my own experiences, so you could kind of like see how you can approach that specific question. So if you want access to this, I will again link it down to the description below. Number 3 is prepare specific examples from your current/previous job or work experience. So if you're fresh from A-level, whatnot, not have a job before, I'm sure you would have done some sort of work experience or something. Use examples from that. I know you're applying to a healthcare kind of job, but you don't have to have previous healthcare job if you're applying as a healthcare assistant or a porter. I don't think you have to have experience in the healthcare. So like my example for that question I just gave you, I talked about my editing job and the mistake I made. So that's not totally relevant to healthcare, but the values I have demonstrated are absolutely relevant for the healthcare environment. Okay, so why is it example to prepare specific examples before you even go to the interview? It's because so that you don't have to think of a good one on the spot. It's really hard to think of a good example while you are kind of like nervous and stressed. If someone's asking you that on the spot, it's kind of hard. So what I suggest is you prepare examples of for integrity and honesty and taking responsibility. I know I have to say my mistake at work about not waking up on time. If the question is about compassion or going an extra mile for a patient, I know I have to mention this experience I had with a patient when I had to stay a bit longer, way past the time I was meant to go home because the patient was upset. So I know specific examples that go with specific values that they are testing me on. So I suggest that you do the same. And number 4, they will use probing questions such as tell me more or what exactly did you have to do. So my top tip is just don't make things up. Be as genuine as you can. They want to see you as a person, so please don't lie to them or anything. And they would find out, trust me. And the last one is practice over and over and over again. Okay, so how I practiced this was I was asking myself the questions and I was recording my responses. Make sure that your response is around maybe 3 to 5 minutes long max. Make sure you could give a lot of detail and make sure that you are very thorough in your explanation. Go through the STAR framework in your head and just practice that over and over again. You'd remember it, and when the actual interview day comes, it will be so easy and it would sound so normal because you've heard it from yourself so many times and you've practiced it over and over again. So as an exercise, I suggest that you should do this. List the values here that, I just listed a couple. There's 3 there. Collaboration and teamwork kind of means the same, but this should just be for collaboration and this is teamwork. But I put, because to me they mean the same. And the questions that they could ask you in this column right here, and example. So here is when you prepare for really good examples. Make sure you do the STAR framework here, so you just fill this in. So for compassion, for example, if the value that they are testing you on is compassion, the question would kind of be in this sort of way. Give me an example of a time when you were particularly perceptive regarding a patient's feeling or needs. And the probing questions could be, what did you do? What was the impact for you and or the patient? So come up with a situation and a task from your previous or current work experience, action, and result and reflection. So you just fill this table in, guys. You can print this off and you could even do your own table. But if you have this before you enter the interview, just looking at reading the values, reading the possible questions and the examples that you have come up with, then you'll be super ready when they ask you things about, tell me a time when you've shown compassion or collaboration or teamwork or organization. You have examples nailed inside your brain, ready just to come out. That's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and I want to wish you good luck for your interview. If you want to have access to more example questions in this question bank that I came up with and detailed answers where I share my own answers to these questions, please check out my ebook. I will link it down in the description below. So that's it. If you found this useful, please like this video, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want to see more of my videos, just go check out my channel. I have no idea how long this video's been, but thanks for watching if you watched it from the beginning. I will insert some timestamps to make it easier for other people to go find what they need from this video. But yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you. Bye bye.